I want us for a moment just to appreciate where we live right now and what we're seeing right now happening with the Rohingya, happening with the Syrian refugees, what's been happening for decades now with Palestinian refugees, just the displacement that's been taking place throughout the continent of Africa with absolutely no outcry from the world. Just take a moment and understand it from this perspective. If we look at the time of the Prophet ﷺ, in fact, if we look at Jahiliyyah, we look at the days of ignorance, we look at the tribal system that existed before Islam, and automatically we view it as incredibly backwards, and we're repulsed by it, and rightfully so. How is it that a person belonging to a certain tribe is entitled to this, and that, whereas a person who belongs to a lesser tribe or doesn't have a native tribe at all is entitled to almost zero economic protection or political protection? But I would venture to say that even in Jahiliyyah, the person who would be in the state of Ibn Mas'ud that lived in Mecca at that time, or a person in whose favor Hilf al-Fudul, we talked about Hilf al-Fudul, the League of the Pact of Justice was established with the Prophet ﷺ participating in it. That person that started that whole thing had a much better situation and was dealing with a less backward system than the one that we're dealing with right now in the global scale of things. What does that mean? If you think about how cruel our current broader political social context is in regards to how it forces people into these difficult situations. What makes a person intrinsically more valuable because they're born in a certain country or they have a certain passport and they have the freedom to travel and migrate throughout the world with very little hiccups and with not even having to apply for a visa if you're from a certain country, and another person, just because they were born in a certain place or because their parents were born in a certain place, not having access to any of those countries, and at best being relegated to some tents at the border of some country, not having any access to public services, not having any access to hospitals, schools, or whatever it may be. What makes that person who's born in that situation less valuable than I, for example, I'm going to use myself, who's born as an American, right, and has an American passport and can travel throughout the world, alhamdulillah, not banned from most countries, with relative ease, whereas a person who has none of that, did absolutely nothing to deserve that status, is relegated to the situation where they have to constantly fill out paperwork, if they can even access paperwork, to be treated like a human being and apply for asylum. And what does that say about our current state of human rights? And again, I don't want to delve too deep into modern refugee law and how backwards it actually is, because this class is meant to give us lenses, and I haven't even started with the hadith yet. Here's the lens, and here's what I want you to think about. As human rights are constantly invoked in our modern day discourse through liberal paradigms, they're often always invoked in the context of freedom of expression and the pursuit of life, liberty, and happiness. And it's usually at happiness where most people haven't even gotten to life yet. Okay, so the human rights of people to do this, the human right of people to do that, the human rights of people to do this in this context. And it's usually in regards to people's individualistic rights to be able to express in a certain way, to be able to live in a certain way. And usually those terms are hijacked for privileged populations. But when you look at the Islamic conception of human rights, it starts at life, and not just at life, but the idea that everyone is entitled to a dignified existence. Every human being is entitled to a dignified existence. So you have human rights in America, in the West, and this is the problem with all the isms, is that they all suffer from classism. They're all plagued by the same disease of working for those that are in a certain status, in a certain economic status, or whatever it may be. Islam starts off with the right to a dignified existence. Before you go to liberty and the pursuit of happiness, you start at life.